Hello, welcome. I'm glad you're here. My name is Marissa, and these are my chronicles. These are my stories. I I've kind of done a few videos to kind of let everyone know why I'm here, kind of what my goal is and things that I want to talk about. So it's just been kind of difficult to decide where I want to start. If I should take it all the way back to the beginning or if I should stick with what's most relevant. And just trying to get feedback from everybody about, what do people want to know? And so I honestly think I'm just gonna be going with whatever feels right for me every week. I've already recorded like a few funny dating stories type of ones. So I'll probably post those sometime this week. Just like, I kind of just want everyone to like get a sense of who I am and how I am and my sense of humor and, all of that. So, I'm a multifaceted human. I'm not just like super serious and about therapy and mental health. I'm very passionate about mental health in America, especially that's where I live. And I'm very passionate about it in my personal life. Like, this is something that I live. I'm not just like talking to clients about it or advocating for it for other people. Much like I've shared before, like I've been a client for, over 15 years now. So I just went to therapy yesterday. So yeah, it's a very real part of my life. And I think the reason that I want to talk about it now more than ever is that I do feel like there's just a lot going on. There's a lot going on in the world. Ever since the pandemic, I feel like the level of suffering that has been happening for so many people is very high. The way that the dating world is just atrocious, and a lot of it I really revert it back to like I feel like as a country we are struggling with our mental health. We're struggling with like, you know, the larger systems that impact us, you know what I mean? Like the price of everything is so high and the cost of living is high, and I just feel like so many people are struggling just for basic needs. And so, I just do a little bit of jargon, but in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, our basic needs such as like housing, shelter, food, and safety are incredibly important for our mental health. Like, we really, like a person who is homeless, who doesn't have a job, who is, just really struggling and suffering, who has substance abuse problems, who is experiencing some type of mental health crisis. um it makes sense, right? Like, it makes sense that they're having a mental health crisis in the midst of all of those needs not being met. And so I just, I want to shine a light on things, and I kind of want to share it from a personal perspective of like, what has it looked like in my life? And of course, like, I'm not going to share everything about my life, but I am going to share a lot. Plenty, I'm sure. And it's funny because I'm just a really private person, and um that's something that I've learned as I've grown up, to be a private person, to protect my peace. um but I think that this is bigger than that. And I just hope if I could just encourage one person with some of the stories that I'm going to share, because I know that there's women and men out there that are just suffering so much and feel like nobody sees them and feel like they just don't have any hope and they don't know what to do. And so, if there's resources and things that I can share or tools that have helped me, that's what I want to do. So, I will probably like attach some links, or I'll talk about or shout out some books or whatever that I have really helped me. And so, if I forget to link something, or there's something I said that you're curious about, just, send me a DM and Yeah, I'll send it to you personally. So I am on Instagram as the Chronicles of Mari, and so um come find me there. The link is, in my bio. So yeah, I guess let's just jump right in. I mean, I was kind of thinking like, so I shared a little bit about like being very angry, and that's part of what brought me into therapy, and just having a lot of, it wasn't even anger, it was rage. And just the fear of that around raising my daughter and being a good mom. I think in the beginning, a lot of my motivations were external, right? I had external motivators such as being a wife and a mom, or even just being, with somebody and being a mom. And so it's okay in the beginning when we first start like our healing journey to have other people be the motivation for that, right? But I think at the end of the day, you have to come to a place where you decide that you're going to do this regardless of who's there, regardless of if you have a spouse or not, or if you have your kids or not, or whatever it may be. um I think the true mission or goal of having like excuse me, having healthy mindset, or having um just being an adult. I mean, really. And when I say adult, like, I guess I mean very specifically like a healthy adult, someone who understands, like, has a self-awareness and has the emotional intelligence to understand what that means. So but yeah, I think that we have to choose ourselves. We have to become self-aware, and we have to choose ourselves, even if it costs us relationships, even if it costs us things that like things with our family. Usually it's with our family. I mean, I'm gonna be honest. I like sometimes I'm like thinking before I say something, because I'm just like, I don't, I don't want to upset people or offend people, but I mean, it's just the truth. And honestly, for me, this platform, I want it to be about the truth. And so, a lot of times our family of origin is where a lot of the dysfunction and the trauma and the toxicity, whatever you want to call it, exists, right? This is where it begins, so to say. And so, and that's not true for everyone, but I think for most people that is true. And so, this is kind of where your belief system is built, right? And so, the things, the way you think, why you think that way, why you react or respond to things, how you deal with emotions, that all comes from your family of origin. And so, um, for me, I come from a very avoidant family, and a very introverted family, and I am an extrovert. I am friends with everybody. I love people, okay? And that was not fun for my family when I was a kid, when I was growing up. And so, um, one of the messages that I learned from a young age was that, like, I was too much. You're too much. You're doing too much. You're dramatic, right? That was one of the other you're being dramatic. And then you know, like, you're not allowed to cry. Like, we don't cry around here. Like, we don't do that. Why are you crying? And so those were like shame-based messages, right? And where those messages came from, right, over time as I was in therapy, like, I got to kind of unpack different stories and different things about my life with my therapist, and that's how I kind of started to find these things out, right? Like, and it kind of, sometimes it takes like sitting with someone else who didn't grow up in the same environment as you, that doesn't know the people that you know, that isn't gonna just like justify or minimize whatever it is that you're sharing, but is gonna be objective. And so that's really what therapy is, guys. It's just sitting with an objective person who's there to listen to you, and kind of regurgitate to you what you're saying in maybe plainer words or simpler words, or they can pick out observations and say, well, have you ever, when you shared this story about your parents, did you ever think about, this that you may have felt, or that, or did you think this and this, or I don't know, they just kind of like help you explore and see your life from a different perspective. And sometimes that can be a really good thing. Like sometimes you sit with a therapist and you tell stories and you talk about things, and in your mind it's like it was so negative and it had such a bad impact on you. And then once you talk it out and they share their perspective or the way they interpreted it, and then you're like, "Oh." And a lot of times it's like retracing those thoughts, those patterns, and the way that we process things, because we process everything through our history, through what we perceive, to be right and wrong, or like there, of course, there's cultural differences, right? Some cultures are a lot more assertive and rowdy and whatever it may, you know what I mean? Like you can get away with this much versus this much, and this culture versus that culture. So I mean, it's all going to be different, right? And of course, we want therapists to have some type of cultural understanding and sensitivity to the fact that, you may have grew up very different from them, and that doesn't make it toxic or bad. So I just want to put that out there. Because I don't want it. So like, because when I first started going to therapy, that was one of the biggest things with my family was like, we're Latino, we don't go to therapy. And then all the therapists that I had were white women. And so that was something that my family had concerns about. They were like, you know, you're just sitting there talking to this old white lady, and what does she know about our family and what how we do things and whatever. And I mean, those are valid concerns, for anyone going into therapy and thinking like, I want to sit with someone that looks like me, sit with someone who can understand me. And although there's a lot of value in that, I don't feel, me personally, and this is just preference, for other people, but I don't feel like I need to sit with um, somebody who's Latina to feel understood or to get the tools and the things that I needed in therapy. I mean, could it have been beneficial in the beginning, especially when I was explaining certain things that maybe came off really weird, to them, or they didn't understand? But then again, their job is to be objective, and to not judge and to not sit there and kind of like do all of that kind of stuff. So, um, I will say though, as a sidebar, I did have one experience. It was actually the first therapist that I ever saw. And she was a baby intern. And I have a really big personality. I don't know if anyone has noticed that, but I say what I mean what I say. And when I was young, like as I said, I was really angry, and um I was not as graceful as I am now, and I definitely didn't look as nice as I do now. Like I've learned to be more smiley and pleasant. But in that phase of my life, I was pretty cutthroat. And so I remember like sat with this counselor. Like I said, she's brand new. She told me I was her first client, and I was like, like I've never been to therapy, and I get the girl that I'm her first client. And she was really sweet, and she was probably, she was just a little bit older than me. She wasn't a lot older than me. Like she was maybe a few years older than me. And so, I kind of like the idea of like someone essentially being my peer. I thought like maybe it'll be more relatable or whatever it may be. And then yeah, no. I don't know. We did an assessment, right? So usually when you first go to therapy, you do have to fill out like an intake and some paperwork, right? And so, we did that assessment, and she went through my assessment with me, and we got to talking about, why am I so angry and what am I so angry about? And, I think I mentioned this before, but where I was going to counseling was it was in a church. And so although the therapy wasn't specifically faith-based, everyone there obviously was faith, like went to church and considered themselves a Christian or whatever. And so you had the option of having faith-based therapy, but it didn't have to be faith-based, if that makes sense. So um that was one of the questions that she asked me. It was like, do you want to involve like God? And do you consider yourself a Christian, whatever, whatever. So it was like all these consensual questions that were happening about kind of like what things were going to look like moving forward. And so anyway, basically we get to talking, and I start sharing about like my life. Oh, my purpose of sharing this about like it being in a church or whatever is like I had a lot of trauma, and like I had a lot of trauma with the church. And so at even at that young age, like from my childhood. And so essentially like I kind of grew up in like a cult like environment. And so um I had left the church for many years when I was young. And then, when I had my daughter, I had decided to go back. And so I was in this like strange place with the church and God, and and I just trying to rebuild, trying to connect with a higher power as an adult without the influence of my family or my parents or anybody from my past, right? And so this was a really important step for me. And I started to share with her a little bit about my past and some of the things that I had been through. And like I'm disclosing, that I went through a lot of abuse as a child, and the type of abuse that I went through, you know, um and like I had never really told anybody that, like other than people who are very close to me. Yeah, like I'm pretty sure it was like I could count on one hand how many people knew that I had been abused. And so um it was like a big moment for me, like to like say this out loud to another person that doesn't know me, doesn't know my family. And obviously I'm there to work through that trauma, right? To work through everything that I went through as a kid. I mean, obviously I'm enraged, I'm angry for a reason. Like there's a reason why I'm harboring all of this anger and resentment. And so trying to get to the bottom of that. And and the therapist started crying, and it was really awkward for me. It was really uncomfortable. And as I shared just a few minutes ago, in my family, we don't cry. Like you don't cry. Like even if you're talking about abuse or you're like it doesn't matter. Like we really don't cry. And so I wasn't crying. I was just sharing. I mean, I think I definitely felt a high level of emotion and anxiety about saying it, but like as I was sharing it with her, and I was sharing details, and like, because this is therapy and that's what we're supposed to do. And so, of course, like I'm a nerd, I researched what therapy is supposed to be about before I went to it. Come on, guys. Like, you're gonna get to know these things about me. Like, I research everything usually before I do it. And so, and I'm a Virgo and I wanted to do it right, type A. And so I was just like, I'm gonna go to therapy and I'm gonna master therapy, and I'm gonna be the best client that these therapists have ever had. And that was the energy that I went into the room with. And so my perfectionism, all these things were just like bubbling up, and like my need for approval, and like is the therapist gonna like me and whatever. And so my people pleasing tendencies, just, yeah, young me was a little bit of a wreck. And so Yeah, she cried, and that like really threw me. Like I honestly couldn't bounce back from that. Like, because then I felt like I had to comfort her. And, this is something that, like, when you're in training to be a counselor, like, they talk to you about, like, not showing emotion when somebody's sharing something super, you know, like traumatic or whatever. And so I don't know. I don't know why she cried. I don't know. Like, it's not like I asked her questions about this. I didn't know that at the time. Um but I definitely felt like I overwhelmed her. And so I think I saw her maybe one other time, and I obviously was like very careful about what I shared. And then I realized, like, I don't think that this is what therapy is supposed to feel like. Like, I don't think I'm supposed to come in here and like walk on eggshells and be careful that I don't say something that's gonna upset you, because the whole point of therapy is to create a safe space for the client, right? And so, and this isn't me like hating on the client or talking mess about them. Like, I understand that, counselors are human beings, and who knows what she had going on in her life. Who knows if maybe she was triggered. I don't know, and that's none of my business. The purpose of me sharing this story with you is this. You might go to therapy. You get all the courage and the bravery to finally go sit in a therapist's office, and they suck. Whether it's because they're not equipped, or they don't know about your culture, or they get overwhelmed by whatever I don't know, or they just don't have good boundaries, or maybe they're late and that bothers you, or maybe they check their phone and that bothers you. I don't know, right? We all have different things in our life that could set us off, right? My point is that doesn't have to be the end all be all of you going to therapy. You going to one counselor, it doesn't work, and then you're like, well, I guess therapy's not for me. Guys, it takes time to find a good therapist that's a good fit. I know that that can feel discouraging. I know that that's difficult to do, especially if you have insurance and you're on a wait list, and then you finally get a therapist and then you don't like them, and then now you have to wait again. I know it freaking sucks the way that our mental health system here works. It's really inconvenient, and it's not great, but it's still worth trying to find another therapist, to sit with someone that you can feel comfortable with and that you can have a safe space with, because that's really like the main point of this video that I want to make is like, I couldn't be who I am today. I couldn't have gotten through all of the like tumultuous and just horrific seasons that have come in my life, where like I genuinely didn't know how I was going to get through it without my therapist, without my safe space. Like, I'm very fortunate that I've never had to be on any medication. I did try medication after I got divorced. I think for me in my adult life, that was the most traumatic and difficult experience of my life, because it uprooted everything that I ever knew. I was with my ex-husband from the time that I was 19. And so that's literally my whole adult life. And so it was really difficult for me to navigate everything. Like, everything was now my responsibility, and it went from sharing a load with someone to having to take it all on, and not having any financial resources, and then, having to find a job while being in school. It was so much. It was so overwhelming. And I'll do a whole episode on, I'll probably do a whole series on the season of my divorce. Um if you guys want me to do that now, I can do that now. Just let me know. But man, the safety and like, it helps so much because, like, here's the thing, like, the way that trauma impacts you, it's not just here, like in your thoughts and stuff like that, right? Like it's not just in your thoughts and your behaviors and whatever. Like trauma has a literal impact on your entire body, your nervous system, your brain wiring. Like there's so much that's impacted by trauma, especially childhood trauma, where like you're still developing and you're going through continuous trauma. So like if you grew up in an environment where like you never really had safety, where you didn't know where your next meal was going to come from, where you know, your basic needs weren't being met, right? Like you were being neglected, your emotional needs weren't being met, you were being abused, all of these things. Like I don't think we talk enough about how much that really impacts your mind, your body, and the way you move in the world, you know? And like so many of us have learned to trust no one, to have no relationships, to have no vulnerability. And I get it. Like I was the same way when I was younger. Like that's why I brought it back to the beginning of my journey, because at that time in my life, and a lot of people don't believe me, especially people that know me today, they're like, Marissa, I can't imagine you being that way. Thank you, because that's a testament to my growth. But like 17 to 19-year-old me to 20-year-old, when I went to start going to therapy at 23, like between like 17 to 23, like I was terrified. And I had to grow up so early. I left my home when I was 17. I basically ran away from home. And, you know, I was so ready to be a grown up and get out of the dysfunction of my home and my family and leave all of that behind. But I had no idea what I was doing and what I was embarking on. And this is how I ended up a 20 something year old mom, right? A 20-year-old mom. And so I think that my life could have taken a very different trajectory if at that young age I hadn't gotten myself into therapy, you know? So it's never too late. It doesn't, you don't have to be in your 20s to go to therapy. You don't have to be in your 30s. You can be in your 60s. It doesn't matter. It's never too late to start healing, to change the way you think, to reflect on your realities and your truth, right? Um and you know, it took me a couple tries to find a good therapist that was a fit for me. But once I did find her, and you know, my therapist that I started with is not who I'm with now. I started with a different therapist than I have now, and she was amazing, and she was exactly what I needed. She was my complete opposite in personality, but she was such a calm, like she wouldn't react really to anything that I would share. And so that was really helpful for me because it gave me access and permission to be emotional in therapy, to let out all my passion and my tears and my anger and whatever I needed to. And she could just kind of be a neutral sounding board for me where I didn't feel guilty or like, oh, am I overwhelming her? Or because that's part of the way that I am because of my trauma is I anticipate people's needs. You know, it's made me a great helper. It's been a gift to me in certain parts of my life. I think it makes me great at working with people because I'm great at anticipating people's needs. Like I can pay attention to things that probably other people don't. And I can probably guess usually what someone may need based on their body language, the way they're talking, you know, things that they express. Like I'm very tuned in with people, you know, especially people that I care about, but really with people in general. And so that has made me really good at the roles that I've had in the past. Um, I probably jumped all over the place, but I hope that the message is still here, which is it's worth it to do some therapist shopping, okay? And if you're not ready for therapist shopping and you're still in your pre-contemplative stage, what do we call it, which is like where you're thinking about that you want to go to therapy or you would like to maybe see somebody, but maybe it's just not the right time yet. That's okay. Like that is okay. And there's so many resources now. Like there's so many ways for you to get educated, for you to do some work on your own with yourself. Um you know, after I did anger management, which really was, it wasn't really anger management, but like we called it that kind of as a joke. It's funny because I'm still really good friends with one of the ladies that I met in that group, and we're both still like a little cuckoo, you know. No, we're just intense people, you know what I mean? And sometimes our intensity and our passion is perceived as anger, and it's not. And anger is not unhealthy. Anger is healthy. It's just the way that we use it. And really, anger, it usually provides us with energy, right? And so that's why when people are angry, they're like, "Da, da, da, da," because that's what anger does. It gives you energy, energy for action, right? Like usually when you're angry, you can use that anger to propel you towards something. Like if I'm really upset about something, I can get a lot done. If I'm really angry and I go to the gym, I can lift real heavy, right? So if I'm using that energy in a positive way instead of internalizing it, because when we internalize our anger, especially as women, it really impacts our bodies. It causes inflammation in our bodies, it causes all of these other issues with our immune system and whatever. But not just that, but like anger turned inward creates depression. And so when we're not living in our truth, when we're not expressing our anger, when we're not giving ourselves permission to feel exactly the way we feel, because usually anger is justified, it's valid. That doesn't mean you should go out and do something violent or do something to hurt someone else, but you can validate that within yourself, right? And maybe with a safe person. And so that is something that I kind of wanted to talk about is safe people. And what does that mean, right? Because this was one of the first things that I had to learn going into therapy. Um is like, what is a safe person, right? And when you're not a safe person and you're unhealthy and you're hurting, it makes it really difficult to identify other safe people and to be a safe person yourself for others. And so a great thing about therapy is that it's kind of this safe space for you to begin to model and practice healthy interactions or safe interactions, and kind of get feedback on like when you say certain things or how you say certain things, and like you'll see like your therapist will give you feedback and they'll talk with you about it. And so it's really like a safe and wonderful place to begin to learn how to do that dance with people of like, things being reciprocal and like, things that go like this, right? That's kind of the image that comes from me, because that's kind of what relationships are meant to look like. It's not meant to be like bam bam, you know what I mean? And just like one person. Relationships are not one-sided. And sometimes they can be one-sided. But that doesn't necessarily make that relationship a safe relationship, if that makes sense. And so, or sometimes in a professional setting, you can have a more one-sided relationship, right? So it's just like the appropriateness of it, or where it fits. Um but I actually found some of my, because I've taken so many classes. I'm like, you're not gonna be able to see this, but I've taken so many classes and I have so many handouts and books and so much material. I'm pretty sure I have an entire tote in my garage of just like material that I've read or gone through over the years. Aside from school, like outside from school. But one of the things that I wanted to kind of talk about is kind of like, what is a safe person? What does a safe person look like, right? And I saw this really cool like little quote that was written online. And so I'll link it on my Instagram. But it says safe people don't punish you for being honest. They don't twist your words, shut down the conversation, or flip the script to make you the problem. They listen, they reflect, They care about how their behavior impacts you, even if they didn't mean to cause harm. And so I think this is a great summary of what safe people look like, right? Um, Safe people are not defensive, you know. I think when you learn to become a safe person, the first thing that you kind of have to do is learn how to set boundaries and learn what your reality is. Like those are kind of the starting points, okay? And like know your value. And a lot of the things that I kind of the angle that I come from things is through the lens of codependency recovery. Because for me, I was a raging codependent. Like I was a caretaker. I was parentified when I was a kid. Like I helped raise my sisters and I had a single mom and I had to grow up really fast. Like I basically was an adult from the time I was 12. And I just had to figure things out. Life moved fast. I didn't really have a relationship with my dad and so it was just me and my mama and my grandma, my nana. And so, my nana did the best she could to help raise us while my mom had to work and whenever and then I had to step in, right? And so it's just it was, it wasn't easy. And so my point of this, I'm like, I'm getting lost in my own rabbit holes. Like I gotta work on that. Um But, I was just such a people pleaser, and I just there was and of course, like, growing up in such a conservative Christian home, you're indoctrinated with this belief that you have to help people and you have to be there for people and, that's your ministry and that's your calling, and so a lot of times, like, I used that as a scapegoat for not dealing with my problems, for not being in touch with my own reality, for not being self-aware, for not setting boundaries in my life. Like, I didn't know how to say no. Like, when I was young, I saying no was really hard for me, and, um, it was something that was just taught to me, like, I was very used to being controlled. And so, although I had a really strong personality and I was the one to kind of say, enough is enough, like, I can't do this anymore. I know this isn't right. And I cut all of those relationships off at that point. Um, it was very painful. It was very difficult for me to remove myself from my entire community, from all the people that loved me and knew me, including my family, my mom, my sisters, everybody. And just kind of go off into the world on my own because it was just too much. It was just too much. And so when I think about it, I think a lot about how I just didn't know I didn't know what safe people were. I didn't know how to connect with people. I didn't know how to be vulnerable. I didn't know how to tell people what I needed. And even back then it's crazy because, I talked a little bit about my community and how, the reason that I am where I am or I am who I am really is because of my community. I met a really good friend of mine at that point in my life when I was really young and just very unsure. And yeah, she was just this amazing woman that, took me under her wing, let me live with her, and just honestly just loved on me and befriended me and became such a safe space for me. And so, it's just like we don't need a lot of people. A lot of times we just need one safe person. And so I encourage you to start with one safe person. And, I know it's not easy to find safe people in the world. I understand that. But they are out there. And so like I was saying, a lot of my recovery that I began back then was under, codependency. And so, like, I did recovery, like, at some point later in my journey, I went to celebrate recovery, and I went to recovery for codependency, in my marriage and in my family and things like that. And so, it's been like an uphill battle for me essentially to not control other people, because that's a big part of codependency, right? Is that a lot of times we think like codependent meaning like I'm dependent on others. No, for me, it was like the opposite. I was hyper independent. I didn't want to need anyone. I didn't want, but I also wanted to be there for everyone. Like I wanted to people please. And of course, I didn't know all these. Like, I'm using these fancy words, like psychological words right now, but like back then, I had no idea that this is what I was doing, right? To me, I was just living my life, being a nice person, being caring. And, it's funny because like later in life, when I see people that knew me when I was a kid, when I was younger, you know, they'll say things about me, that to them was very admirable at my age that I was this way. But the reason why I was that way was because I had to be. Like, I had to be a grown up at such a young age. And so, carrying that burden, carrying that load of feeling like I have to take care of other people, feeling like I have to make sure everyone else in the room is happy so that I can be happy. Like, I really didn't have my own identity. Like, I really didn't know how to just be me. I didn't even know who that was, especially adding on the religious component of like, I wasn't allowed to do so much. Like, I wasn't allowed to watch so many things and listen to certain music. And so it's like I always had this chip on my shoulder, like I'm missing out on the culture. I'm missing out on things. I want to be part of what everyone else is a part of, and I wasn't allowed to. And so all of that to say, it was really difficult in the beginning to identify safe people and to be able to start to let my walls down and be vulnerable. Being vulnerable meaning to be honest about how I really felt about something, or to be honest about what I really thought about something, etc., without the fear of like retaliation or getting in trouble or telling me that's stupid. You shouldn't think that, right? Safe people don't do that. Safe people let you have your own thoughts, ideas. They let you be you. They love you for who you are, even if they don't always agree with you, even if they think some of the things you do and say is a little crazy, whatever. But it's like they let you have that because that's what being healthy adults is about. We're not we're not always going to agree with each other, and we're not always going to like each other, but there can always be a foundation of respect and love and respect for who you are. And yeah, I mean, if there's bad things that are happening, we can speak up, we can say something, right? But you know, we need to be careful that we're not overstepping. And I think a lot of times from good intentions, right? Or we think we're coming from a well-intentioned place, we're just kind of bulldozing past people and what their wants and desires are, and we're trying to control them and protect them from themselves. But at the end of the day, that's not your job. Like, your job is you. Like, you're responsible for yourself, your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviors, your choices. That's your job, right? Not the other person. So if the other person feels like that's not my limit, then let them have that's not their limit. Like, we have to start to develop our own identities and bring it back to ourselves, because honestly, at the end of the day, the only person that I can change, that I can control, that I can do anything about in this world is me. And so when I sit in that stance and I let that be my truth, then I stop going out here and trying to manage and finagle with everyone else, because it's pointless and exhausting, because you can't control them. And people don't want to be controlled, and control is not love. And control is also an illusion. So, yeah, this coming from a type A, red, ENTJ, whatever personality profile you want to go off of, Virgo, like, for me to be able to learn that lesson, and that lesson took many years. Okay. So I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. That lesson took so many years, so many lessons for me to finally get it. And to this day, it's still something I struggle with. Like, I want to control people because I think I can run your life better than you can, for sure. However, that's not my job. That's not healthy. And that's not me loving you. If I love you, I'm here for you. I can, if you ask me for advice, if you ask me for guidance, I will happily give it to you. But I'm not sitting here volunteering to everyone in my life what to do, how to live their life, and how they're doing it wrong, etc. That is not who I am. That is not who I am. Because I want to genuinely show up for people and love the people in my world. And so sometimes people in my world are a hot mess, and I sit with them in their hot mess, and I love them right where they are until they're ready to come out of the mess. And then I'm there. And so, but that's taken so much growth and so much time to get to that place where I can do that. So, yeah, I'm sorry if this is all over the place, but this is kind of the way I am and the way I talk and the way my brain works. So to me, it was all relevant. To me, it all connected. But yeah, this is gonna be kind of my first my first long episode of talking to you guys and just kind of telling you about me and what's going on. So yeah, I don't know. Stay tuned. I'm definitely gonna I'm gonna record next week again. And so I think what I want to do is I'll do a new episode every other week, and then in between those weeks I'll do a funny dating story. And so I'll do like a more serious one like this where I'm just like kind of sharing about, therapy or a season of my life or whatever it may be. And then like I said, in between I'll just throw out some funny, dating stories. I mean, I'm still going to throw some nuggets in there for you guys, some learning points. But, we'll keep it light. So, I mean, I want all of this to feel light, guys. I don't want it to feel like super heavy, like you signed up for a therapy podcast, um, go go do something to help yourself today. Go do something good for yourself that helps you. Whether that's buying a book, listening to a podcast, doing a meditation online, doing some yoga, go work out. I mean, whatever it is that feeds into you and gives you something good for yourself, like go do that today. Please, for me. Um, I know it's hard to take care of ourselves, especially when we have so much going on. We all carry different loads in life, and so I just want to encourage you. Um, but like I said, I'm glad you're here, and I'll see you next time.